My fiancé, in order to save his beloved white moonlight, personally sent me to prison. Everyone said my life was over, but on the day I was released, he was waiting at the gate. With red eyes, he said he regretted it and wanted to start over with me. He didn't know. The cold-faced prosecutor who personally convicted me during the trial back then. For 5 years, he came to visit me every month. He came today as well, took off his uniform, and put a ring on my hand. You've been wronged, my wife. Now, we should go seek justice. The day I walked out of the prison gates, the sunlight was so bright it was almost blinding. It had been 5 years. I raised my hand to shield my eyes, taking some time to adjust to this long-lost brightness. Not far from the gate, a familiar Porsche was parked, and beside it stood a man, my former fiancé, Justin. He was wearing an expensive suit, but it couldn't hide his overall decadence. Blue stubble had grown on his chin, his eyes were filled with red bloodshot veins, and when he saw me, he almost staggered over. "Evelyn, I regret it." His voice was hoarse, carrying a hint of pleading. "Can we start over?" I looked at this face that once obsessed me, but my heart was like still water, without the slightest ripple. 5 years ago, it was this man who, to protect his cherished white moonlight Celine, personally forged evidence, sending me, the financial director, to court, making me bear the stigma of economic crime for the huge sum of public funds Celine embezzled. 5 years in prison had worn away all my love and hate. I said nothing, pulling the cloth bag in my hand containing a few old clothes, preparing to bypass him. But he persistently blocked my way. "Evelyn, listen to my explanation." Back then His words were interrupted by a screeching brake sound. A black Hongqi sedan steadily stopped beside us, the door opened, and a tall, upright man stepped out. It was him, Lucas. 5 years ago, he wore a neat prosecutor's uniform, eloquently convicting me in court with every word. For these 5 years, the monthly visits were all from him. Today, he wasn't wearing his uniform, just a simple black trench coat, yet he still carried that undeniable sense of oppression. He walked straight up to me, his deep gaze landing on me, then he took off his trench coat and draped it over my thin prison uniform. I was stunned. Justin beside me was completely shocked, pointing at him, incredulously asking, "Prosecutor Lucas? What are you doing here?" Lucas ignored him, just took out a velvet box from his pocket, opened it, revealing a simply designed diamond ring inside. Under Justin's bloodshot gaze, he took my left hand and slowly slipped the cool ring onto my ring finger. "You've been wronged, my wife." His deep voice clearly reached my and Justin's ears. "Now, we should go seek justice." "Wife." Justin seemed to have heard the biggest joke, then furiously rushed forward, trying to grab my hand. "Evelyn. Are you crazy? Do you know who he is? He's the one who personally sent you to prison." His hand hadn't touched me yet when it was coldly blocked by Lucas. "Mr. Justin." Lucas's tone had no warmth, like tempered ice. "Please call her Mrs. Evelyn. Besides, I was just doing my job according to the law, while you are the chief culprit who framed her." Justin's face instantly turned liver-colored. Protected by Lucas, I got into the car. As the car started, I saw Justin frantically chasing after it in the rearview mirror, still shouting my name, until his figure became a small dot. Inside the car, Lucas handed me a document instead of a bouquet celebrating my release. "Information on the Gu family's industries. Which one do you want to start with?" I was completely stunned. For these 5 years, during his monthly visits, he never said much, just quietly looking at me through the glass, as if monitoring a prisoner's reformation. I thought we were cat and mouse, judge and criminal. I never expected that we were actually husband and wife. Before I could recover from this massive amount of information, my phone rang. It was a text from Justin. He said he wanted to give me 10 million as compensation, begging me to forgive his unavoidable actions back then. Looking at that string of numbers, I only felt irony and directly blocked him. Lucas took me to a high-end apartment, saying it was my future residence. That same evening, Justin, somehow finding out the address, actually brought a group of reporters to blockade the apartment building downstairs. Flashlights kept flashing, reporters' microphones almost poking my face. Miss Evelyn, is it true that you and Mr. Justin broke up due to a misunderstanding? Mr. Justin says he has always felt guilty towards you. Will you accept his compensation? Justin stood aside, putting on a deeply affectionate and unrepentant appearance, looking at me with guilt seemingly overflowing from his eyes. He wanted to use public opinion to force me, portraying me as a gold-digging woman who, after release, climbed higher branches and abandoned her devoted ex. Just as I was surrounded impenetrably, Lucas's car stopped nearby. He got out, silently parted the crowd, pulled me into his arms, and used his body to shield me from all the lenses and inquiries. He looked at Justin with an icy, piercing gaze. Mr. Justin, harassing my wife, it seems 5 years haven't taught you to abide by the law. The next day, Celine arranged to meet me. She is now an internationally renowned young pianist, the treasure Justin holds in his palm. While I am just an unemployed vagrant with a stained resume, freshly out of prison. In the coffee shop, she was dressed in designer clothes, elegantly stirring her latte, looking at me with eyes full of condescending pity. Evelyn, it's been 5 years, you've become much more haggard. She hypocritically started. Justin told me he went to find you, he's just soft-hearted, pitying you, you don't really think he wants to get back with you, do you? I didn't speak, quietly watching her perform. Seeing me ignore her, the smile on her lips deepened. Don't be ungrateful. The one he loves has always been me. For me, he can send you to prison, and now naturally, for me, he can make you lose everything again. You can't fight me, it was true 5 years ago, and it is now. She seemed to enjoy this feeling of controlling everything, smugly showing off her achievements from 5 years ago. She said that back then, she was obsessed and embezzled a large sum from the company for investment, resulting in total loss. On the verge of ruin, it was Justin who, to preserve her reputation and future as a pianist, step by step designed the scheme, using my trust in him to forge all the accounts and push all the blame onto me, the financial director. Do you know? On the trial day, Justin was watching you from below, his palms all sweaty. He said, as long as I'm fine, sacrificing you is worth it. Celine's voice carried a cruel smile. As she spoke, she deliberately picked up the coffee, and the scalding liquid poured entirely onto my clothes. She wanted to see me in disarray, to see me scream in shock. But before that cup of coffee could splash on me, I quickly grabbed her wrist. The force was so great that her face changed instantly. Ah! What are you doing? Let go! She exclaimed in pain. I looked at her panicked eyes and slowly, without spilling a drop, poured the entire cup of coffee onto her expensive white long skirt. The brown stains quickly spread, ugly and unsightly. I leaned close to her ear, in a voice only we two could hear, calmly said, Celine, the game has just begun. This time, I'll make you unable to even cry. Celine's personal piano recital was about to be held soon. To please her, Justin spared no expense, not only booking the best concert hall in the city but also launching overwhelming publicity. The media was full of praise for their fairy tale romance, and between the lines, portrayed me as a vicious ex who was unwilling to be abandoned and tried every means to sabotage. Justin's mother also found me, arrogantly throwing a check in front of me. 50 million, take the money and get far away, don't come out to embarrass yourself and entangle my son. A woman like you who's been in prison isn't even worthy to carry Celine's shoes. In front of her, I tore the check to shreds. Tell your son, I find it dirty. Justin was probably enraged by my attitude. He mobilized the Gu family's local connections, making it impossible for me to find any decent job. Even when renting a better house, the landlord would back out at the last moment before signing. He wanted to drive me to a dead end, to make me understand that without him, I was nothing. That late night, he called, his tone carrying a hint of condescending charity. Evelyn, have you caused enough trouble? Come back, I'll buy you a house, hire a few nannies to serve you, I can keep you, like a canary. As long as you obediently listen, don't come out to bother Celine's eyes. Listening to the hypocritical voice on the other end, my stomach churned, and I directly hung up the phone. Hugging my knees, I sat in the dark living room, feeling the isolated despair from 5 years ago overwhelming me once again. At that moment, the door opened, and Lucas returned. He seemed to have just come back from a business trip, still carrying the aura of travel weariness. He turned on the light, saw the suppressed coldness and hatred in my eyes, was silent for a moment, and placed a document in front of me. The time has come. I opened the file bag. Inside was a sealed dossier, the evidence I desperately collected when I was at my wits' end back then but didn't have time to present at the trial. And under the dossier, there was also a voice recorder. Lucas pressed the play button. What came out was exactly the full conversation from yesterday afternoon in the coffee shop, where Celine personally admitted to me how she embezzled public funds and how Justin helped her frame me. On the evening of Celine's personal piano recital, the concert hall was packed. Under the spotlight, she wore a holy white gown, like a princess untouched by dust. Justin sat in the very middle of the first row, gazing obsessively at his radiant beloved on stage, as if looking at a rare treasure. Media flashlights kept flashing, recording this prince and princess fairy tale romance. As one piece ended, thunderous applause erupted. Celine elegantly stood and bowed, her face bearing the most brilliant smile of a victor. Just as she prepared to play the final encore, pushing the atmosphere to its climax, the beautiful background on the huge LED screen behind her suddenly zizzled and turned pitch black. Everyone was stunned. Immediately after, a clear female voice came from the speakers. "You said, back then it was you who embezzled the public funds, and Justin designed to frame me to protect you." That was my voice. The smile on Celine's face instantly froze. "Yes, what else? The one he loves is me, sacrificing you is nothing?" That was Celine's sharp and smug voice, echoing throughout the concert hall, crystal clear. The whole audience was in an uproar. Reporters, like sharks smelling blood, frantically aimed their lenses at Celine on stage, whose face was ashen. Oh my God! So Evelyn was wronged. Celine is the criminal? And she made her ex-boyfriend send his fiancé to prison? Too vicious. Celine panicked and tried to turn off the sound system, but her legs weakened, and she embarrassingly fell on the stage. Justin furiously rushed backstage but was surrounded by swarming reporters. "Mr. Justin, is the recording content true? Did you really, for Celine, personally frame your fiancée Miss Evelyn?" In the midst of the chaos, my phone rang. It was Justin calling, his voice like he wanted to devour someone. "Evelyn. You're crazy. You're trying to ruin her." I stood in front of the apartment's floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the endless stream of car lights below, my tone calm as if talking about something unrelated to me. "Don't worry, Justin. This is just the first gift I'm giving you too." After the storm, the entire city was discussing Celine and Justin's scandal. Celine's reputation was ruined, all collaborative performances cancelled, becoming a rat everyone shouted to beat. When I returned home, Lucas was sitting on the sofa, as if waiting for me. Why help me to this extent? I finally asked the doubt in my heart. Just because we are husband and wife? He was silent for a moment, then took an old craft paper bag from the study and handed it to me. "Look at this, and you'll understand." I opened the bag. Inside were some yellowed letters and an old investigation report. Lucas's voice slowly sounded in my ear. His father, Harold, was once an upright businessman and also Justin's father's partner. 20 years ago, the Gu family and the Su family joined forces to set a trap, defrauding Harold of all his assets and pinning a huge illegal debt on him. Harold, unable to bear the humiliation, ultimately jumped from the company's top floor. And at that time, coerced and tempted by the Gu family to participate in this conspiracy, was also my father. My heart sank heavily. My dad Your father still had a conscience. Lucas said. Afterward, he lived in guilt and secretly collected evidence of the Gu and Su families' crimes, preparing to hand it to me back then. But just the day before our scheduled meeting, he died in a car accident. My mind went blank, so my father's death was not an accident at all. To avenge my dad and to retrieve the evidence belonging to my father, I entered the prosecutorial system and step by step reached today. Lucas looked at me, his gaze deep and complex. And you are your father's only daughter, and the only person the Gu family would fear. Marrying you was both to protect you and to complete our 2 generations' revenge. We are fellow travelers bound together by hatred. I finally understood. There was no love between us, only a meticulously planned revenge. And I was the most important pawn in his revenge plan. Celine's scandal became a mountain pressing on the Gu family. The Gu family's stocks hit the limit down for several consecutive days, and the company's reputation plummeted. Justin's father Raymond was a thorough businessman. Seeing that Celine had become a liability to the Gu family, he immediately ordered Justin to break up with her and sever ties. For a woman, risking the entire Gu family, are you out of your mind? Celine is innocent. It's all that bitch Evelyn's fault. Dad, you can't treat her like this. I'm telling you, if you still recognize me as your dad, break clean with her immediately. Otherwise, get out of the Gu family. The father and son argued fiercely in the Gu family mansion, ultimately parting unhappily. Justin chose love, moved out of the Gu family, stayed by Celine's side, trying to use his last strength for her public relations. Inside the Gu family, this incident created huge rifts. Looking at the information Lucas gave me, I knew the time had come. I anonymously sent a detailed report to the tax authorities. Inside were all the ironclad evidence left by Lucas's father back then, supplemented by my father later, of the Gu company's tax evasion and falsified accounts over the years. The evidence was solid and irrefutable. A week later, the tax authorities formed a joint investigation team and officially entered the Gu group. The Gu family was immediately in chaos, besieged on all sides. I stood in front of Lucas's apartment window, watching Raymond's aged and embarrassed face besieged by reporters in the news, feeling no pleasure in my heart, only a cold numbness. Lucas came from behind, draping a coat over my shoulders. Cold? I shook my head. I knew this was just the beginning. The Gu family's winter had just arrived. Seeing the Gu family's big tree about to fall, Celine, the vine clinging to the tree, immediately began seeking new ways out for herself. She thought she was doing it secretly, but unaware that her every move was under Lucas's surveillance. She started secretly contacting Justin's biggest competitor, the crown prince of the Zhang group. She wanted to exchange the Gu family's business secrets she knew for the Zhang family's protection and wealth. For her, Justin didn't hesitate to break with his father, giving up the Gu family's inheritance, racking his brains daily to help her salvage her reputation. But what he waited for was his lover's most fatal betrayal. When Justin saw photos of Celine and Devon chatting happily in a high-end restaurant, he completely collapsed. He rushed back to the luxury apartment he bought for her, confronting her with the photos. The two erupted into an unprecedented fierce argument. Seeing the matter exposed, Celine completely tore off her disguise. Yes. I contacted Devon. So what? Justin, do you think I really love you? She screamed hysterically, venting all her resentment. What I love is just the status of the Gu family's young madam. It's your money. Now the Gu family is finished, you can't give me anything, why should I still follow you? Back then, if you weren't stupid, insisting on stepping forward to take the blame for me, do you think I'd look at you? I would have found a better catch long ago. These vicious and hurtful words, like sharp knives, stabbed deeply into Justin's heart. He was probably furious, forgetting that he had accidentally turned on his phone's recording function because he wanted to record Celine playing the piano. That piercing, cruel conversation was recorded in its entirety. The white moonlight he once risked everything to protect personally trampled his love and dignity underfoot, crushing them to pieces. That night, it poured heavily. Justin stood downstairs from my apartment, like a soulless statue, letting the cold rainwater soak him from head to toe. He came to find me, bringing his heart riddled with wounds. I didn't let him in, just coldly watched him through the window all night. The next morning, I opened the door, preparing to go out. He, as if finally waiting for redemption, with bloodshot eyes at over, thud, kneeling in front of me. That once spirited and arrogant young master of the Gu family now looked as miserable as a stray dog. He raised his hand, slapping his own face hard, one after another, loud and dull. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I was blind. I'm a bastard." His tears mixed with rainwater slid down his face. "It was me who mistook fish eyes for pearls, treated true heart as garbage. I was wrong, can you forgive me? Please." From his soaked pocket, he took out that phone still flashing a red dot and handed it to me. "This is the recording of her personally admitting, she admits she doesn't love me, admits that back then I was stupid. I'm willing to testify in court, help you overturn the case, help you send her to prison. I don't want anything, I just want you, just look at me again, like before." Looking at his pitiful and ridiculous appearance, the last ripple in my heart also disappeared. I took the phone, my tone without a trace of warmth. "I don't need your forgiveness. I just want you and her to pay the due price for what you've done." His crying stopped abruptly, incredulously lifting his head to look at me. I closed the door, shutting out his desperate wails. Some mistakes, once committed, never qualify for forgiveness. With the recording of Celine personally admitting her crime and Justin as the most crucial witness, the case reversal process was immediately initiated. Lucas was highly efficient and quickly applied for a retrial. I stood in court once again. Unlike 5 years ago, this time I was no longer the isolated, indefensible defendant. Lucas took off his prosecutor's uniform and sat beside me as my attorney. He wore a tailored suit, with a stern expression and a powerful aura. He was clear and logical, breaking every lie from Celine's lawyer one by one. Celine on the defendant's seat, her face pale, trembling non-stop. She probably didn't expect Justin to really stand up and testify against her. Justin as a witness, standing on the witness stand, looked like his soul had been drained. His eyes vacant, voice hoarse, painfully recounting the full truth of how 5 years ago, he conspired step by step with Celine, forged evidence, and sent me to prison. Every word was like a heavy hammer, striking Celine's vital points. It also shattered the last illusions I had about him. The evidence was irrefutable. Celine slumped on the defendant's seat, sobbing uncontrollably. Finally, the judge solemnly pronounced, I, Evelyn, was acquitted. While Celine, for the crimes of embezzlement and false accusation, with multiple crimes punished together, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. When the bailiff took away Celine, who was crying and shouting I'm wronged, my tears finally couldn't be held back. It wasn't joy, wasn't excitement. But all the suppressed grievances and unwillingness from these 5 years, at this moment, finally found an outlet. Lucas reached out, gently holding my cold hand. His palm was warm and strong. Evelyn, it's all over. After Celine went to prison, the Gu family also faced its final judgment. The charges of tax evasion were established, the company was fined heavily, and the capital chain completely broke. Plus the previous reputation ruin causing stock market turmoil, this commercial empire finally collapsed with a boom. The Gu Group officially declared bankruptcy. Raymond turned white-haired overnight and was taken away by the police for investigation on multiple economic crimes. Justin sold all his properties and luxury cars to pay debts, but it was still a drop in the bucket. He fell from the clouds into the mud, truly becoming penniless. The last message I received from him was late one night. The text was simple, only 5 words, Evelyn, I owe you. From then on, he vanished as if evaporated from the world, never appearing again. The great revenge was achieved, all who hurt me received their due punishment. I thought I would be ecstatic, feeling triumphant. But when everything settled, looking at the empty room, my heart was left with only immense confusion and emptiness. Where to go in the future, I had no clue. Lucas seemed to notice my emotions, said nothing, just drove me to the seaside. The sea breeze blew on my face, carrying a hint of salty moisture. From behind, he gently hugged me. This embrace was not like lovers, more like comfort between comrades. Evelyn. His deep voice sounded in my ear. The past is all over. From now on, try to live for yourself. Looking at the distant scenery where sea and sky merged, my eyes gradually moistened. Live for myself? Can I still? With revenge over, my relationship with Lucas became somewhat subtle. We were legally genuine husband and wife, but more like allies who fought side by side. Now with the great revenge achieved, the alliance seemed due to expire. I waited for him to come home in the living room, with a divorce agreement I drafted on the table. Lucas, thank you for everything you've done for me. I pushed the agreement in front of him. Your great revenge is achieved, I've cleared my injustice. I think our marriage should end too. He glanced at the agreement, his facial expression instantly darkening. The air seemed to freeze. And? He sneered, his tall figure carrying an oppressive force, stepping towards me. Evelyn, after using me, you want to kick me away? I was stunned. Why did this sentence sound so familiar? But the roles of perpetrator and victim back then were completely reversed. I was forced into the sofa corner, with no retreat. He leaned down, hands supporting on both sides of my body, completely encircling me in his arms. Mrs. Evelyn, his attractive thin lips almost touching my ear, warm breath spraying on my neck, bringing a shiver. After seeking justice, shouldn't you fulfill your wifely duties? His voice was deep and hoarse, carrying a hint of dangerous seduction. Looking at his close, deep eyes like a starry sky, I only felt my face burning hot, heartbeat so fast as if about to jump out of my chest. This was the first time in 5 years that I blushed and my heart raced because of a man. And this man was the one who personally sent me to prison and personally got me out, my husband. I began trying to understand Lucas's life. Nominally husband and wife, we were more distant than strangers. He was a man disciplined to the point of rigidity, getting up on time every day, morning run, work, home, reviewing files. Unsociable, sparing with words. I once thought he was just an emotionless legal machine. But gradually, I still discovered the clumsy tenderness hidden under his cold exterior. When I cooked, he would silently move the cilantro aside because he remembered I don't eat cilantro. When I had period cramps, he would wordlessly prepare warm brown sugar ginger tea for me. Occasionally, I would wake from the 5-year prison nightmare, and each time I woke, I would find myself tightly held in his arms, him gently patting my back like coaxing a child. I always thought his kindness to me in prison had ulterior motives. Until one time, I met the prison guard Big Sister who had taken care of me. Big Sister held my hand and quietly told me, Evelyn, you must thank your Lucas properly. These 5 years, he did more than just visit you once a month. He arranged everything long ago, making everyone inside take extra care of you, otherwise, with your delicate skin, you'd have been bullied to death right after entering. Every month he came, it wasn't just a visit, it was to check the work, to see if you were wronged. My heart felt like it was hit hard by something. So, in those days I thought were isolated and helpless, there was always a pair of eyes silently guarding me from behind. His love, deep and silent, was enough to melt my long-frozen heart. One weekend, I helped Lucas organize the study. In the deepest part of the bookshelf, I accidentally found a locked iron box. As if possessed, I tried opening the combination lock with my birthday. Click, the lock opened. Inside the box was not the secret files I imagined, but a thick, yellowed diary. I turned to the first page. The neat handwriting belonged to a young Lucas. So, we didn't meet for the first time in court. As early as university days, we knew each other. Back then, he was the most famous poor student in the law school, aloof, proud, solitary. While I was the music department's belle, surrounded by admirers. We were supposed to be 2 parallel lines never intersecting. Until that afternoon, in the library, he almost fainted by the bookshelf due to low blood sugar and stomach issues. It was me, passing by, who casually handed him a piece of chocolate from my pocket. I still remember the look he gave me when he raised his head, surprised, wary, with a hint of imperceptible vulnerability. I didn't take this small matter to heart, but he remembered it for many years. He wrote in the diary, that was the first time I tasted something so sweet. Also the first time seeing such a warm smile. Her appearance was like a beam of light, illuminating my gray life. She said, "Life is so bitter, need to eat more sweets." Evelyn, so her name is Evelyn. So, I was never a tool in his revenge plan. But the only light he had deep in his heart, guarded for many years. My tears, drop by drop, fell on the diary, blurring his handwriting. Holding that diary, I cried uncontrollably. So, in the years I didn't know, someone had loved me so deeply. When Lucas returned, he saw me holding the diary, crying like a tear-streaked person. He was stunned, then quickly came over, somewhat flustered, wiping my tears. "What's wrong? Who bullied you?" I shook my head, for the first time actively and forcefully hugging him. I buried my face in his solid chest, feeling his strong heartbeat, choking as I whispered in his ear, "Lucas, thank you. Thank you for not abandoning me in my darkest times. Thank you for loving me all these years." His body instantly stiffened, then with greater strength, he tightly hugged me back. We just quietly embraced like that for a long time. Outside the window, the city's myriad lights gradually lit up, like a brilliant galaxy. I raised my head, looking at his deep eyes, softly asking, "Do you think we count as starting over?" He lowered his head, with a gentle and lingering kiss, answering all my questions. After a long time, he released me, forehead against mine, his voice carrying an irrepressible smile. "No, we are not starting over. Evelyn, our story is truly beginning now." I finally completely escaped the past quagmire. By the side of a man who loves me deeply, and whom I also deeply love, I welcomed my true rebirth.